A game about the last robot on which the survival of the human race depends. We sail a boat across the ocean and collect supplies, similar to the raft. There, the creators perfect the theme and safely reach the shore. The authors of The Last Caretaker have just set sail. How did they start? I'm Bob and I invite you to my review. We start by turning on our robot on the platform and preparing the boat for a long journey. We refuel, charge the batteries and collect all kinds of scrap metal. It sounds simple, and it is, but it took me almost an hour to figure out what goes with what, learn the controls and pack my stuff onto the ship. As we set sail, I say, well, let's set off into the blue void, far beyond the horizon.
This vessel is more than just machinery. It's your refuge, your home now.
Except that's not quite true, because the first stop is just around the corner. So, my next stop was probably a slow start. I get myself organized, figure out the main task, and get a distant goal somewhere far, far away. I sail day and night fighting the elements and running out of supplies. No fucking way, not here, not like that. As far as the eye can see, we can see poles, platforms and buildings sticking out of the water. In 4 words, we are not alone. At that moment, some of the air went out of my balloon of enthusiasm. Based on the description and title of the game, I assumed that we would be sailing across the ocean, but without stopping every 5 minutes. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We spent much more time on land, or rather on platforms, than on the ship. Personally, I miss the isolation that I thought I would find here. Well, those are my first impressions, but what next? Maybe I'll start with energy. Our robot has 2 bars, life and battery. As we control the machine, we slowly use up power. When the blue line reaches 0, we systematically lose a part of our life until we die, just like at work.
Good job.
So we need to find a source as soon as possible, to recharge from time to time. To do this, we install solar panels and wind turbines, and we obtain building materials by processing almost everything we find. And that's basically what the game is focused on, collecting and building and collecting. Okay, but what are we building and why? Well, to have electricity, mainly for that. Unfortunately, that's pretty much what the game comes down to at the moment. There is a lot of repetition here. We arrive at a platform and we see a closed door in front of us. We need to supply power to the building. So we set up a power source and the door opens. The lights come on and we can move on. Then we have an elevator or a computer that has no power. So we either set up another generator or run a cable from the existing one. What do we have in these buildings? Why do we need to get there? There are 3 answers to that. The first is the main task of saving the human race. We pile machines, incubators, everything to achieve the goal. The second is to turn on the transmitter that will allow us to discover markers on the map. And the third is the resources, the components needed for construction. That's it, and unfortunately only that. In the site locations we find absolutely nothing except raw materials. There are no hidden surprises, additional construction plans or equipment in the game. The game only has a main storyline that boils down to a few tasks and few additional missions, which also do not break the routine. The only things we can build are visible in the skill tree. It may seem like a lot, but sadly it's just an illusion. Apart from the mentioned energy generators, we can build a few machines that help convert materials into various forms of fuel. A chest to store things, a forklift and weapons. We need weapons because the platforms are overrun with small robots, slugs and space worms. Electric weapons are good for robots, and flamethrowers are good for everything else. I recommend making one as soon as possible, because melee combat is not very effective, especially against blobs. And that's everything we can build and craft. As I said, there's not much. An interesting feature is the ability to construct a forklift. I tried to come up with some use for it. I had an idea to build a large energy battery on a pallet and transport it to the platform to temporarily power local systems. But the idea died at the start, because you can't build a battery on a pallet. Besides, there would be a big problem with leaving the ship for land, cause there are no loading ramps here either. I couldn't find any other use for this vehicle, not on the ship and not in this form. I mention this because this vehicle was added in the first major patch, which worries and baffles me a little, because there are more important things that the developers could focus on, instead of adding a useless gadget that can you play with for 2 minutes. The game looks nice, especially at night during a storm, with waves lifting and rocking the ship and us bouncing around the deck. But even though the graphics are just nice, not hyper realistic, the FPS can still drop very quickly to a very low level. To be fair, I don't have a supercomputer. For those who are curious, I've pasted my specs in the description. But the latest top titles run smoothly for me, and here, at the worst moment, the FPS temporarily dropped to 8. Of course, I contributed to this a little, because my cargo hold looked like this. I threw some forklifts on board, looking for a purpose for them. Once I dealt with the mess a bit and stuffed everything I could into crates, I gained some FPS back. However, it didn't last long because I created this. Despite my shenanigans, the game shouldn't slow down like that. Sadly, the optimization in this game is pretty bad. Apart from chests to store things in, we have nothing else. We have no decorations to build. We can hang shelves or banners, and we can't paint the ship. All we can do is collect teddy bears and basketballs. But that's art for art's sake. So, apart from collecting resources, there is nothing else to do in this game, and we won't collect too many of them or build a million wind turbines just for fun, because the computer will suffer. It would be nice if the creators of this game made something more survival oriented. First of all, they should move all the platforms away from each other, so that you can see every little point, which will give the game a greater sense of isolation. In addition, there are currently 2 extremely annoying things. The first is the hoses and connecting them. I am referring to a situation where I wanted to put an extra fuel tank for the flamethrower on my back. I don't know how many times I had to reconnect it, because I accidentally disconnected a connector and everything started to get tangled up. Every single time. The second, even worse thing is detachment of constructed structures from the surface of the ship. It didn't happen often, only about 3 times during the entire game, but the last time it effectively blocked my ship. Somewhere in the jungle of turbines, one detached and I couldn't move the ship, because the collision box of the object was affecting the ship and blocking any movement. As if I was skewered like a sausage over a fire, I could only spin in place. The worst part is that this happened after I loaded a save, and everything was fine before that, so it can happen just like that at any time. A short pause. After recording the review, a small patch was released that supposedly fixed it. I can partially confirm this, because I loaded the save file with this error, and now the ship was moving, no longer blocking by any detachment element. But I don't know if it fixed the problem entirely. And now the rest of the review. What's even worse is that once my save file got corrupted, meaning the game loaded, but I had maybe 1 FPS, if not less. And from the second save file everything worked as it should. So you should save the game as often as possible, and not at least 2 slots. The music on the other hand is great, it's very atmospheric and I was happy to play just to listen to it. It really sets the mood and is one of the game's strongest points. But looking at the game as a whole, you can guess that I won't give it a high rating. In its current state I give it a 2 out of 5. It's a typical early access game in every sense of the term. The content is minimal, there aren't many tasks, there are optimization issues, and there are bugs that make the game difficult or even impossible to play. However, I'm not writing this production off completely. It has an interesting start, being the last one who can save humanity. It just needs time to develop. I recommend The Last Caretaker only to people who are very interested in this project and would like to support the developers by purchasing this title. However, keep in mind that it will be a long time before something meaningful comes of it. So far, one major patch and several hotfixes have been released, and the authors have shared their roadmap, which looks promising. All we need is patience and hope that they will safely reach their destination with this title. That's all for today, be well!